ஹர நம பார்வதி பதையே ஹர ஹர மகாதேவா தென்னாட்டுடைய சிவனே போற்றி எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் இறைவா போற்றி. Welcome everyone for the keynote address. So I'll be giving a presentation on the contribution of Hindus in Australia. I'll also go into a brief history of Hindus and in particular look at statistical analysis about the Hindu community. It shows where we are doing well and where we do have shortcomings and how we can rectify those shortcomings to ensure that our community thrives and better contributes to this nation. So this is what I'm going to speak about today. So brief history of Hindus in Australia is exactly where our population is distributed across the country. Then some key stats, and again this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics of the 2021 census. So where we're overrepresented and where we're underrepresented, what we can do, and a few aims for the future for our community. So let's start with our history. So the earliest signs of Hindus in Australia can be traced back to the year 300 CE with the arrival of Indonesian merchants interacting with Aboriginals. Now during the 19th century, and this was again during the gold rush and all that, Hindus came to Australia in negligible numbers. So the first Hindu temple was built in Auburn in 1977. That was the Sri Mandir. Since then, we have many temples that have emerged across various different cities in this country. So we had Daniel Mookhey, his name was mentioned, in 2015. He became the first Hindu to be elected to a state legislature in 2015. Now, this happened here in New South Wales. 3 years later, in Victoria, we had a lady by the name of Kausalya Vaghela who was elected as an MLA in 2018. And just this year, we had Varun Ghosh. He became the first Hindu senator to be elected to the Australian Federal Parliament, and he swore in on the Bhagavad Gita as well. So here's, I've given a few images. The Sri Mandir, our oldest temple here in Australia. Then we got the Sri Venkateshwara temple just outside of Sydney. Great drive to go there to Helensburgh. Highly recommend to go there if you haven't, especially for the kids. And the swearing in of Senator Varun Ghosh earlier this year. So then we look at the Hindu population and its distribution. So as we can see here, at the 2021 census, these are the numbers, so 684,002. So approximately 251,000 Hindus live in Sydney. That's 37% of all Hindus in Australia. So you can see why we're holding the National Hindu Conference here in Sydney. So this we have 206,000 Hindus that live in Melbourne. So that's less than 31% of all Hindus. So we can safely say that more than 2/3 of Hindus in Australia live in two cities, Sydney and Melbourne, and with the other 1/3 distributed everywhere else, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, or even regional and rural Australia. So this is our numbers as far as language speakers. So let me just point out a few things. Hindu and Hindi are not the same. Hindi is a language. Hindu are people who are part of a Hindu civilization or Sanatana Dharma. And you can see all the different languages that are spoken. And I would also like to highlight this because this happens a lot within our community that they see someone who happens to be Hindu and they start speaking Hindi. Again, let me stress, not every Hindu knows Hindi because you have Balinese Hindu as well. They don't know Hindi. So just keep that in mind as well, that when you're going out there, that there are Hindus who speak so many different languages. So we're not a monolithic community. So a few more additional information. So among the Bharatiya community in Australia, Hindus are 45% of the population. So this is 51% of all Hindus in Australia. Again, this highlights back to what I pointed out in my previous slide. The other 49% originate from countries such as Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Fiji, Singapore, and Malaysia. And I'm sure we have a few people from those countries who originate from those countries in this room as we speak. So there are 415 Hindus who are of Aboriginal origin. And if you look at the Tasmanian Hindu community, the majority of them are Bhutanese origin. And I'm sure we have some Bhutanese Hindu members here as well in this audience. So let me get to some statistics here. So let's look at our educational stats. So safe to say that we're a very well-educated community. So more than 2/3 of us possess bachelor degrees and higher. which is why you see some, like, Hindu doctors, like, Hindus as, like, engineers, IT technicians, because of that statistic over there. So we're excelling beyond the average in Australia. Now, this goes back to our next stats, which is on employment. As you can see over here, most Hindus are working full-time, and that this is well above Australian average. And if you look at our occupation types, again, this ties in with our this ties in back with our educational status. The largest employers are professionals. So this again comes back to doctors, accountants, lawyers, engineers, IT technicians, all that other stuff. Ideally, I would like to see more representation in some other areas as well, because this is key. And I would also explain later on as we go on exactly why this is important. So then we have more on employment. So this is household employment. So in a household, we have both parents working full-time, or both the husband and the wife working full-time. So that's where we have most of. So yes, it's safe to say that because we have a high employment rate, which means we'll have a low unemployment rate, we do pay a lot in taxes as well. So we're a net contributor to the tax system. And why is this important? I'll get to that in the future slides as well. So we go to our income stats. Again, in all these metrics, this is weekly income, we are above the Australian average. Again, another pat on our back. However, let me go on and say that we need to use our resources exactly where it's needed for the betterment of our community. So from this, we can see where are we overrepresented. IT, medical fields, aged care work, banking sectors, retail and supermarkets. That's where we're overrepresented. But where are we underrepresented? And this is very important. And this is what I want everyone to see. All these areas. It is what it is. For example, you would have seen when the Ram Janmabhoomi Pran Pratishtha happened, you would have seen what the ABC said. The coverage was entirely negative. Our side was not shown. They kept talking about how, like, a mosque was destroyed and then the temple was built, as if, the temple was incorrectly built, when in reality we know that that wasn't the case, that all we did was reclaim that which was already ours. Yeah? And remember, the same media said absolutely nothing when Turkey converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque. Yeah, that's what they did. So this is why it's important that we have representation in the media. Academia is another one. We can talk about, like, Audrey Truschke and what she's doing, but unless we get our own people to counter Audrey Truschke in academia, we're going to get more of that. And religious schools, and I know that we're working on creating a Hindu school in the future, but this can only work if collectively every Hindu is putting their effort in. Now, I've mentioned in the previous slides, we are employed in all these industries. We have low unemployment rate. We have high income rates. But that needs to go in bettering the community for our future. So how to address these shortcomings? So as I've mentioned before, there's a Hindu school that is happening, how we should perhaps unite as a community and put more effort in making this happen. And this is very important because education is another big battleground and very important in our community. So we have the existing Hota network. How about we expand the existing Hota network? I mean, we know that not every temple is in that network. Not every other language or other community organizations in there. We need to expand. Ensure that we include, those that we often overlook in there as well, because only then are we, strong in Australia. So I would also recommend temples also have a role in this. Put more efforts in education. So what do I mean by that? And let me give you an example. The Sri Venkateshwara temple, and I really commend them for doing this, they have 12 Arvars and 64 Nayanmars. Arvars being Vaishnavite saints, Nayanmars being Shaivite saints. And what they've done is that if you go there, there's a QR code. You scan the QR code and you can learn all the information about each of the Arvars and the Nayanmars. And this is important because we have kids that are born and are growing up over here. And I recommend, why is it that only that temple is doing it? Why not every temple in this country do that as well? I think that would go in a long way in ensuring that, the next generation knows about what what is like, part of our Hindu civilization, right? I mean, that's how we can counter people who can often say that they want to erase Sanatana Dharma. Yes, those people exist as well. We can only counter that if our own people know what Sanatana Dharma is, and that we can, therefore ensure that as Hindus, we can better educate the next generation, the generation after. Because right now, these temples exist, and we need to make sure that 100, maybe 200 years from now, they exist, and they don't go become museums. And this is the most important one. Hindus must join politics, even not as MLAs or MPs, even as staffer roles. And I'm sure that we have a staffer role over here, as someone who's a staffer here as well in this building. So this is what I mean, because that way we can influence policies. And let me give another example. So when you had a Khalistan referendum abomination happening in Melbourne last year, that farcical referendum they were holding, you need to have people informing MPs and MLAs about what this Khalistan movement is and how detrimental it is, not only for Bharat, but even in this country as well. Because trust me, if they can hold a referendum, who knows who else will hold a sham referendum in this country, yeah? This is what I mean. That we can see in America, Vivek Ramaswamy, he didn't come there overnight. He came there over years of effort. Decades of efforts was done to finally get a Vivek Ramaswamy in a position in the United States. Rishi Sunak is the same thing. He's the Prime Minister of the UK. But Hindus didn't get there overnight. They put in the effort to make sure a Rishi Sunak is there. So just like that, we also need to put that effort in. Otherwise, we're going to have people like David Shoebridge going up there saying all these things about Hindus and VHP, and that we have no counterweight to someone like that. So, in conclusion, I'll give our future aims. Let every temple be involved in the future to process Hindu education. So we must have a Hindu school. It must be functioning to a higher standard, and must have the full support from our Hindu ecosystem. So parents, even the business community, which I'm sure is part of, like if we have a Hindu Economic Forum, yes, all those guys should also contribute for this Hindu school as well. We should have a Hindu MP by 2030, along with Hindu representation in every state legislature. That's not an unrealistic goal, I hope. And we should also have channels on YouTube and other social media platforms to counter lies that the ABC and all these other media outlets would say on issues such as Ram Janmabhoomi. So with that, I would like to conclude. Hari Om.